This is the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show in SEC Country. Texas Pete drama for your mouth. Bob Fiscella, my old friend Matt Stewart, and we'll try next week to actually start at 10 o'clock Eastern Time.
Well, if you don't roll in here like at 10:05. He's been here for a long time.
We're still working out the kinks a little, but we promise next week we're going to start at 10 o'clock. This show is all about the SEC. Roll over the games that happened last night, look ahead to next week. And, Matt, we got to start with the game last night in South Bend. Georgia goes up there. The Georgia fans, it was almost like a home game, and the Bulldogs pull it out, the late field goal, 20-19. I don't know if you saw the post-game news conference. There's Kirby Smart doing it. We're just chopping wood. Great victory for his team.
Well, it was a huge victory for his team because the Georgia fan base, the Bulldog Nation, if you will, was so invested in this game. And you saw it evidenced by the entire contingent of Bulldog fans in Chicago for the entire weekend. They all went to the Cubs game on Friday, went to South Bend last night, and they'll be at the Falcons game today at Soldier Field in Chicago. Most of them will. And it was just a sea of red and black there at Notre Dame Stadium. Kind of reminiscent, not totally to the extent. I was there in 1981, January 1, 1981, when Georgia beat Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl to win the national championship. And I remember it being about 90% or 95% Bulldogs there in the Superdome. Wasn't quite like that last night. But really, it was a signature win, a win that Kirby Smart and the Georgia program really needed to get. I thought it was a really, and I hate using the measuring stick barometer game kind of cliche stuff, but it really was for Georgia. And I think that Georgia proves that they are in a place where they are now moving forward, that in second year for Kirby Smart, things are going to be different for the Bulldogs, and they might actually be a team that is competing for the SEC Eastern Division title, which they've been picked to win.
You know, I was worried about filling an hour, and then I'm thinking, no, I'm working with Matt Stewart. I'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just, I'll suck up all the air in this room before the day is through.
Hey, we got comments already coming in. Love this one from Gary, who obviously knew we were late. It's 10 o'clock somewhere. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. Before we break down this game any further, do want to hear from Kirby Smart after the game, his post-game news conference. Kirby, pretty fired up about it.
Well, thought it was a great atmosphere tonight for college football. It's a shame either team had to lose that game because it was really hard fought. I got a lot of respect for the program we just played. I got a lot of respect for the head coach we just played. I got a lot of respect for the team. I've also got an immense amount of respect for our team and the way they competed in the game. It was very sloppy at times, a lot of penalties. We made it as difficult as we could make it, which is frustrating because we got an opportunity to have a good football team.
All right, and the comments keep rolling in. Jared says Georgia will not win the East. Jared, we got time to talk about that.
Well, come on. It's September, for Pete's sakes. I mean, I know you're probably pulling for somebody else, but, I mean, it's September. I mean, there's a lot of football to be played.
Jared, right back in. Let us know who will win the East.
And then we'll know what team he pulls for.
Got to break down this game, and we got to start it off with Jake Fromm. He makes the start. And I was worried. I'm not a Georgia fan, although I like to see Georgia win. But I'm worried, will the lights be too bright, Matt? And they weren't.
They were not. You mean you're talking about at Jake from State Farm, which is his Twitter handle, one of the best Twitter handles out there, spinning off of the State Farm commercial. He was 16 for 29, 141, a touchdown, one interception. And as we had predicted, Georgia did not put too much on Jake Fromm's plate. This was going to be a game where they were going to rely on their running game, and Georgia rushed for 185 yards. Sony Michel, Nick Chubb had good ball games on the ground. Georgia didn't, they didn't dominate on the ground, but they ran the ball because they could, and they weren't stopped, so therefore they could control things, control the tempo of the game, and not put a whole lot on Jake Fromm's plate. And you're right. I mean, his first start of his career, he goes up to South Bend and wins a game. It was a 4-8 Irish team a year ago, but still, it's a big environment, and the lights were not too bright for him. Hey, this is a kid who was a star on national television when he was 12 years old and led Warner Robins to the Little League World Series championship.
Only Matt Stewart would have information like that.
This guy's been on big stages all of his life. So, the fact that he was able to go and win a game at Notre Dame is not that big.
He's never been on a stage this big. This was the biggest of big.
The League World Series is pretty big. That's the whole world,
Hey, Maurice says Georgia will win the East. Heather says it'll be Tennessee. Got a long way to go, folks. All right. they're undefeated in the conference. Oh, well, they haven't played a game.
They haven't
yet.
played in
All
the
right.
conference.
Let me ask you. I'm going to put you on the spot here because this is the question that Georgia fans are going to be asking as well. Let's play the what-if game.
Okay.
What if Jacob Eason is healthy for the next game? Who do you start if you're Kirby Smart?
Well, I think if Eason is healthy, then Eason should get the start. He is the starter. He's the guy that won the job coming out of fall camp. He's the incumbent. He's the guy that started last year. He was the number one quarterback. I don't think you lose your starting job because you were injured. What kind of message does that send to your team? If you get hurt, you're going to lose your starting job. I think what you do is you give him a chance to compete for it, but I think he is the number one guy. I think Fromm now gives you an option there, and I don't think that Eason's coming back for the Samford game. I think it depends on how long Eason's out. If Eason is out until, say, mid-October,
if he's healthy next week, who are you
Well,
starting? This is a what-if game.
But he's not. So, these what-if questions. I'm going to be a Nick Saban on you here. I don't answer. I don't answer hypotheticals. Oh. I don't answer what-if questions. So, no, he's not healthy for next week. My answer to your question is when he is healthy, depends on how long he's been out, but certainly he gets the opportunity to come back and win his job.
All right. I'll ask myself this own question. Yeah, if he's healthy, Fromm still starts the football game. He just looked like he was in control of this offense. He wasn't razor sharp with his passes. A couple of others were a little bit questionable on some of those other throws, but he did look good enough. He was in control, and he did drive that team down when they needed the field goal. I thought they were going to need the touchdown, had the touchdown pass dropped, and they're still able to get it done. Georgia's offense as a whole, and I think this is more a Jim Chaney question, 326 yards of total offense. Do you think?
Did you notice all around college football, especially in the Southeast, all the low yardage totals, these games that were dominated by defense? I think that's kind of our theme here today. And it was Georgia. Georgia held Brandon Wimbush and Josh Adams to 55 yards rushing after Notre Dame had run for 422 the week before against Temple. Lorenzo Carter had a huge game. Davin Bellamy had a huge game. Georgia's defense, 3 sacks, 7 quarterback hurries, 9 tackles for loss in this game. And I think all around, I think that was to me at least, the theme of the day in college football was defense and how defenses were the story around college football. And that's kind of a break from the norm of what we've experienced here the last couple of years where it's all been offense, offense, offense.
Well, Matthew is writing in, says, come on, guys, enough about Georgia. Beverly says the same thing.
It's an hour-long show, folks. We're going to get to your team.
All right. You want to say anything else about Georgia?
Javon Wims, second consecutive game. He had a spectacular, huge catch, one-handed catch. This kid is a playmaker. That's the one-handed catch he made right there. Also, I thought, we talked about Michelle and Chubb. I thought we also saw a little bit of DeAndre Swift, the freshman out of Philadelphia, had a big 40-yard run in this ball game. Another option here for this Georgia offense. But the story for Georgia today, or last night today, same thing, their defense. The story was their defense. They brought back almost every starter on their defense this year. I think that showed. And they shut down a pretty good rushing attack. And I know don't go to sleep on the fact, they had 422 yards rushing against Temple. And I know it's Temple, but still, that's a good rushing attack that Georgia just slammed the door on last night.
Smith was a monster last night. And for the first time since Kirby Smart took over, I said to myself, wow, that is a Nick Saban defense.
Yeah.
That is a Nick Saban defense.
Like yeah, you're right.
All right, let's move on. Texas Pete's scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Auburn goes to Death Valley, the other Death Valley, and kept it close, but in the end, lose to Clemson 14-6. No offense whatsoever in this game. Before we break it down, Matt, and hold on. Okay. Before we break it down, want to hear from Gus Malzahn, just a short soundbite talking about his quarterback, Jarrett Stidham, who threw for all of 79 yards. Coach, let's have it.
Jarrett's a good quarterback, and Jarrett just needs experience. A lot of times there wasn't guys open, okay? So that had something to do with him holding the football.
Well, he says Stidham is his guy.
Do
you want to start there? Is Stidham the guy?
First of all, I have a bone of contention here to pick with you. You said no offense. Why was there no offense? Because there was great defense.
So you're saying
Clemson's defense had 11 sacks. They sacked Stidham 11 times. Junior defensive end Justin Bryant had 4 sacks. That was double the total of his first 2 seasons on campus combined.
Ryan Gunn writes in, I sacked Stidham.
Okay, well, probably not from your sofa, you didn't, but Clemson certainly
I like
did.
it, Ryan.
11 times. Senior linebacker Dorian O'Daniel, 14 total tackles, 10 solos, a sack and a half. Junior defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, if you don't know the name, remember the name. You're going to hear it in the NFL draft in the first round next spring. 10 total tackles, 2 sacks. The 6'4", 300-pound defensive tackle, one of the best defensive tackles in the nation playing for Clemson. Remember that name. And sophomore linebacker Trey Lamar, who played for Roswell, Georgia High School, 6 total tackles and a sack in that ball game. And the Auburn defense was good, too. The Auburn defense was good in this ball game, too. They just didn't have an answer for Kelly Bryant, and Clemson had an answer for Jarrett Stidham.
Lillian writes in, who didn't sack Stidham? And Carl says, get on the bus, Gus. Okay. You say, hey, it's all about the defense, but remember, Gus Malzahn is an offensive genius, Matt. He's a genius.
So is Dabo Swinney.
He's a genius.
So is Dabo Swinney. I mean, and it wasn't like Clemson actually.
Dabo Swinney is starting a young quarterback. You got a guy in Stidham that played at Baylor a whole season.
But he hadn't played for 2 years. So what's the difference? I mean, you got Stidham, who hasn't played for 2 years. You got Kelly Bryant, who's been sitting for 2 years behind Deshaun Watson.
I wouldn't want to be sitting here next to a guy without experience. I'm glad to have you.
You're talking about like Clemson rolled it up on them. They only had 284 yards offense. I think you got to give the Auburn defense some credit too. Carlton Davis, the junior defensive back, had 11 solo tackles. Senior linebacker Trey Williams had 9 total tackles. Difference in this ball game was Clemson was able to protect Kelly Bryant, so Kelly Bryant got things going, and Auburn did not protect Jarrett Stidham. I mean, people are going to want to, beat down on Stidham a little bit, but Clemson's defense did that because the Auburn offensive line didn't protect him. If you're an Auburn Tigers fan today, your big concern is the fact that your offensive lineman did not protect your quarterback, and the quarterback cannot perform when he's flat on his back, and that was the case in the game last night at Death Valley.
Rodney says, hey, don't talk about Arkansas. You know what, Rodney? We haven't yet, but we will.
We're getting to Arkansas
Ruin
now.
Your day, Rodney. That's what we're going to do.
We're going to get to Arkansas.
Right,
you talk about offenses that are struggling.
They want us to go back to talking about Georgia. We'll move on.
Watch the replay.
I got a little tease for you. Later on in the show, we're going to ask Matt the question, is Auburn a contender or a pretender? So you got to stay with us for that. All right, let's move on. South Carolina.
Okay.
On the Texas Pete scoreboard, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete, goes into Columbia, and Will Muschamp's team pretty much dominates. Well, let's talk.
They don't want us to talk about South Carolina.
You guys want us to talk about TCU, Arkansas? We can do that. All right.
I'd rather talk about South Carolina first,
all right.
Whichever you want to do.
There we go.
About South Carolina.
I told you we were going to talk about
Let's
South Carolina.
talk about South Carolina. South Carolina is 2-0. South Carolina is 2-0. They've had 2 big wins on the road. They beat NC State in the quote-unquote neutral site game in the state of North Carolina. And then they go on the road and they win in Columbia, Missouri, convincingly, 31-13. So South Carolina has now won more road games than they did all of last year when they went 6-7. They did it despite the fact for the second straight week their offense was outgained in this ball game, 423-359, which shows you that the total offense stats can oftentimes be very misleading. But this is a South Carolina team, I think, that has to be considered one of the big early surprises in the Southeastern Conference. They are 2-0. They're off to a 1-0 start. They have Kentucky next week. They got a great chance to be ahead of the field at 2-0, and they got that game in Columbia, South Carolina. So they got a great opportunity to be out to the early lead in the SEC East at 2-0 and 3-0 overall.
They were outgained in this game, outgained against NC State, but managed to. No, I'm just saying they managed to come up with the big. Hey, before we break down this game any further, got to hear from a fired up Will Muschamp. As you can imagine, he was pretty pumped about the win last night. Take a listen.
Really proud of our guys. We didn't play particularly well on the road last year. It was something we really emphasized going in this year, understanding that we got to win some games on the road in our league to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And extremely proud of our guys. It was an outstanding team win.
I like me some Will Muschamp.
How do you not like Will? Coach Boom!
I like him.
So they get it done. And before the season, I want to tell you, Matt, I looked at this schedule, and I'm thinking that South Carolina could start the season 0-2. They're 2-0. And I don't know if Will Muschamp is doing anything different as a head coach at South Carolina, but this team looks a whole lot more organized last year as well than his Florida teams. Look, there just seems to be the play calling is smoother. It just seems things seem to be moving a lot better at South Carolina.
Well, I like Muschamp a lot. I think he's a good coach, and the Florida experience kind of put a sour taste in people's mouths about what kind of coach Will Muschamp is. I think he's a great motivator. I think, he is a former defensive coordinator. So typically speaking, when you have a head coach that's a former defensive coordinator, defensive coordinators tend to be more passionate, more emotional, more, get up in the guy's grill and get them charged up and fired up, where offensive coordinators who become head coaches typically are more analytical. They're more about the X's and O's. That's just kind of the nature of those two different, position coaches. Offensive line coaches are kind of like defensive coordinators. When you have an offensive line coach becomes your head coach, they're typically, more fired up in your face kind of guys. And so I like Will Muschamp. I think he's doing a great job at South Carolina, off to a good start this year, 2-0. Deebo Samuel, we're going to talk about him a little bit later on. Second consecutive week, he returns a kickoff for a touchdown, a 97-yard kickoff return after Missouri had taken a 10-0 lead. And so a 97-yard kickoff return for Deebo Samuel. That cuts it 10-7. On the very next play, Jamias Williams. I love this kid. Jamias Williams is going to be a big-time star at South Carolina. He gets a pick. Deebo Samuel, very next play, 25-yard touchdown run. In the span of 15 seconds, South Carolina had flipped the script, had gone from 10-0 down to 14-10, and they basically, controlled and dominated the game from there on out as far as the tempo of the game. And I know, again, Missouri had a lot of yards. Yards are. Who was it who said that stats are for losers? And and it is. I mean, you can roll up 400 yards of offense.
Donald Trump?
No, it was before Donald Trump. But anyway, you can roll up 400 yards of offense all you like. You lose by 18 points. What good is that to you? Jake Bentley, I thought, was solid. 18 of 28 for 187 in the air and a touchdown. Samuel was 5 for 45 receiving. Even their tight end Hayden Hurst, big 6'5", 250-pound target, had a 39-yard touchdown reception and a 2-yard touchdown run. Don't sleep on South Carolina.
No, I'm not. Well, Josh, South Carolina has a good chance in the East. I'm not surprised. I saw their fall camp. Jared says, hey, it's like the old CSS days, but live on Facebook. Look at that.
You remembered CSS. I thought everybody had forgotten it.
Forgot what?
Yeah, exactly.
Carl says, cupcake schedule for them. Pretty good wins. You go on the road again.
Cupcake schedule?
North Carolina State's a good team.
NC State is one of the contenders in the ACC.
Missouri jury's still out. What do you think of Barry Odom's
But you're going on the road, and Missouri was the favorite.
I agree.
And I agree. I thought South Carolina.
I
agree. South Carolina should have been the favorite in this game, and they proved that with the result, 31-13. But you do go on the road, and Missouri's not an easy place to win. Any place in the road in the SEC on a Saturday night is a difficult place to win, and South Carolina made it look easy. I mean, I don't know, who you're a fan of. Remember, Georgia had to pull it out by the skin of their teeth at Missouri on a Saturday night last year. Missouri, before Odom was the head coach, they won 2 SEC Eastern Division titles, lest we forget. And I agree, they're in the bottom half of this SEC East Division, no doubt about it. But anytime you go on the road and you win on the road on a Saturday night, I think it's a big deal.
Well, Benjamin wants to know, what does Missouri do to fix this crisis? And Armin says Mizzou has no defense. We all knew that. I'm not sure where Barry Odom turns at this point in time. Gary Pinkel was a special coach, and he took Missouri to places in the SEC that I never thought they'd get, at least not that quickly.
Yeah.
And when he decided to retire for health reasons, I had a sense that there was going to be some problems.
Yeah, and I think there are. And it's going to be a long season for Missouri, and I don't see any early remedies. They don't have that many Missouri states on their schedule. They're going to have a hard time winning games in the SEC, and I think South Carolina kind of, magnified that with their 31-13 victory. But, don't call South Carolina's schedule a cupcake by any means. They've had 2 very legitimate opponents. Anytime you're playing an SEC opponent, come on. I mean, and you're going to call an SEC opponent a cupcake? SEC games are tough. All conference games, whatever conference you're in, whenever you're playing a conference game, that is tough because conference teams know you better than anybody else. So if an ACC team playing an ACC team, SEC team playing an SEC team, they're always tougher than non-conference games because they scout you. They know you better than anybody else.
All right, so they're 1-0 in the conference, home to Kentucky next week.
2-0, 3-0 overall.
And then Louisiana Tech.
Yeah.
4-0, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mississippi State ran Louisiana Tech last night in Ruston, so I'd say, yeah, there's a very good opportunity that South Carolina will be 4-0.
And we're going to tease again. Matt will tell us later in the show whether South Carolina is a contender or a pretender. I'm really not sure at this point, and I'll leave it at that. All right, let's move on. Texas Pete Scoreboard, spice up your tailgate. Texas Pete will do it, and Arkansas loses to TCU 28-7. I don't think
Didn't just lose to them. Got
well, I was
beat
going to
down.
say, I'm not surprised that they necessarily lost this game, but I'm just surprised that how badly they lost, and more so, Matt, the fact that Brett Bielema's teams, you know, this is a physical team. That's what he wants to put on the field. They got out-physical. They got out-Bielema last night.
Yeah, this was a very un-Big 12-like victory for TCU, wasn't it? I mean, you know, in Big 12, all about scoring and no defense, but that's not the way the Horned Frogs played this game. They won the time of possession 34-26, 42 carries for 195 yards rushing. They were 10 for 14 on third downs. They held the Hogs to 267 yards of total offense. You know, they had 3 sacks. They shut down Austin Allen. He was 9 of 23 passing for 138 yards. He was only 4 of 13 for 31 yards in the second half. It was a thorough domination by TCU, who had not won in Fayetteville since 1984, back when TCU and Arkansas used to be old Southwest Conference rivals. It was just their 4th win against Arkansas in the last 35 meetings between the two teams.
Well, Rodney writing in said it was embarrassing. Obviously a Hogs fan.
It is embarrassing for them.
All right, Brett Bielema, let's talk about the coach for just a minute. I don't think he's on the hot seat.
Yeah, he's on the hot seat. You better believe he's on the hot seat. It's his 5th year. They're going backwards.
All right, they're going to finish the year 6 or 7 and 7 and 6, and they'll go to a bowl game, and that's where they'll be at the end.
6 and 7, 7 and 6 will probably get him fired this year.
Can anyone do any better at Arkansas? That's a tough place to recruit. They got to pull out of Texas. You're fighting for a lot of teams. You got to go into Louisiana.
Whether you like him or not, Bobby Petrino, and I'm sure most people don't like him, but you just asked the question, can you do better? Bobby Petrino did better.
All right, good point. He did do better.
And they've got a long history of coaches that have done better. They've got a great history, a great tradition.
Their history was in the Southwest Conference, where you are playing a whole lot easier schedule than you're playing the SEC. A different era when Frank Broyles was winning 9 and 10 games every year.
No doubt.
I'll give
no doubt about it. But they have a long. But here's the problem with that. You said it's a different era, but they haven't forgotten that era. That's what they're accustomed to. They're accustomed to that kind of success, and so. You know, you can't just sell the folks on the fact, well, you're in the SEC now, and now you're going to be a 6, 7, maybe 8-win team every year. The fans there are not going to buy it. And Bobby Petrino came in there, and look, you know, there's no question about it. No one likes Bobby Petrino except maybe the people at Louisville.
That's not true. Beverly says, loved Bobby P. Obviously, she was never on the back of his motorcycle.
Exactly. Or maybe he was on the back of her motorcycle. I mean, but hey, look. You know, well, that's what happened. He was riding on the back. No, he was driving. No, he was. Yeah, you're right. He was driving, and they had a wreck or whatever.
Of course,
I mean, there's plenty of urban
legends
legends about that story that we won't get into. But the bottom line is, Petrino has proven that he is a good head coach, whether you like his personality or not. He's doing it there at Louisville as well with Lamar Jackson and all that kind of stuff.
Wait. I'm going to throw this out right there from Chris. How about Les Miles at Arkansas?
You know, I don't know. I mean, there seems to. Well, you know, I've never have been a big.
Writes in, by the way, hate the motorcycle.
Okay. I've never been a big Les Miles fan. I mean, obviously his record and his resume speaks for itself. He did win national championships, SEC championships at LSU. But I mean, he's got a great resume. You know what? Don't say that too old stuff. We're too old too. So unless they say that about us. No, I don't. You know, I don't buy that. You know what? I don't buy that stuff about. You know, you got to go young. You got to be young, and you know, to connect with the players. If you know how to win, you know how to win. Nick Saban's, 65, 66 years old now or whatever.
I think it's more of an energy thing once you get into your late 60s, though, mid-60s.
That's why you hire young assistants to go out and recruit for you. I mean, head coaches aren't the ones out there beating the bushes getting these players. The assistant coaches do that. The head coach is only the closer. He sits there in the office on his big leather chair behind his big desk. Hello, son, come on in here and play for us.
So that's what Nick Saban's doing.
Well, yeah, Saban's the closer. Saban ain't out there beating the bushes. Saban's the closer.
He's not relaxing in that easy chair. Although he does eat a few
I was using that as an exaggeration to kind of illustrate the point that the head coach is the closer. He's the guy that closes the deal. He's the guy at the car dealership. I got to go talk to my manager to see if we can cut you this deal, kind of thing. And you go in there and you see the guy, Big Bob, who's running the Chevrolet dealership, and says, I'm going to cut you a deal here. We don't do this for anybody else.
Alex says the Hogs are young. The Hogs are young. I do love Allen as a quarterback. I think he shows a lot of moxie. I think you put him with a little bit different.
He has.
Allen's
been good. Allen's been good. But I mean, he got shut down by TCU, no doubt about that. And it may be true that they're young. That happens. I mean, that happens with a lot of programs when you cycle out the older class. You got to be able to adjust to that. And Bielema is running out of time. He's in his 5th year. He's now 26 and 27. As a head coach there at Arkansas. I did take over in tough circumstances after the Petrino and then the John L. Smith thing. I'm sure Arkansas fans haven't forgotten about the John L. Smith thing. But, I mean, he's in a tough spot. He was a tough spot taking over. It looked like he was making headway, but now it looks like they're going in reverse, and that's not a good thing to be when you're in your 5th season.
All right, Alabama fans, time to talk about the Crimson Tide. Take you back to the Texas Pete Scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Tide put a little beating on Fresno State, 41-10, what we expected. Yeah. Jalen Hurts, Coach Saban said after the game he thought he did a very nice job, and you look at the numbers, only 128 yards passing, but runs for 154 yards.
Ran for 154, though. Come on.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying. There are Alabama fans that say he needs to throw for 200-plus yards every game.
Well, I mean, you didn't have to do that against Fresno State. I mean, Fresno State was a 44-point underdog. This was a typical Alabama game. And I guess some of the reporters were asking Saban about it afterwards. I mean, look, Saban is never going to take an overmatched opponent, which Fresno State clearly was, 1-11 last year. This is Jeff Tedford's first year as the head coach, former California head coach who's had success. Fresno State's his alma mater. He's back there. Saban's never going to be a guy that's going to put the pedal down to the floor and keep his starters out there and run up the score on an overmatched opponent. And he didn't do that yesterday against Fresno State. And these reporters who keep expecting it to happen, expecting Alabama to come out and put up a 63 or 70-0 score on a team when clearly they could. Alabama probably could have beaten them 102-0 if they wanted to. But what purpose does that serve Nick Saban? Saban uses these games as a chance to use his young players, got his freshman quarterback in there, got his 5-star running back in there, guys that are deeper on the depth chart, got him some great experience, make sure people don't get hurt, get out of there with a win, use it kind of as a, glorified practice, if you will. And I don't want to undersell Fresno State, but clearly Alabama was the dominant team, and we knew that was going to happen. And that's, Nick Saban's smart for doing that, actually.
All right, the comments are rolling in from the Alabama fans. Robert says, roll Tide, baby. Jared says, Jalen Hurts is a boss, son. I guess that's to me. Yeah, I'm not arguing. Jalen Hurts played phenomenal last night. And as you said, you also got the freshman quarterback from Hawaii in, Matt. You want to pronounce that name for us?
Tua Tagovailoa.
Tungo Vailoa. That's right.
Did I get it right? Yeah.
6'9", 64 yards. And I think
Najee Harris got in there, 13 carries, 70 yards, 5-star. Do they have anything but 5-star running backs at Alabama? I mean, they got Najee Harris, a 5-star running back, and what is he? 3rd on the depth chart, 4th on the depth chart, and they got him in the ball game, got him some carries, and. I mean, this is the typical Saban deal. I mean, this is the way they got Colorado State next. That'll be a much more formidable opponent, but Mike Bobo's team, a team that Alabama should beat. But Saban does it right. I mean, he hasn't won all those national championships by accident. He's got a formula and a way for doing things.
He just sits back in the easy chair and just closes, and that's all he does.
That's with the recruits.
Love the Texas Pete hot sauce. Some hot comments from Nick Saban after the game. Love when Nick mixes it up with the media. Take a listen to this.
You guys can see better where you watch the game from than I can see where I watch the game from. What'd you think?
I thought it was so-so.
Okay, well then, I appreciate your opinion, Hell, if I watch the film and I think it's so-so, maybe we'll try to hire your ass. Is that it?
I love it. I mean, he is the college version of Bill Belichick. Now, see, and
Better than Bill Belichick.
Well, here's the difference. In college, you can't get away with the Bill Belichick show. I mean, you can't. Right. You can't
you got
give
a fan base.
Exactly. You've got to be at least a little bit. You got to be a little bit softer. And Saban's gotten really good at it. He just makes jokes out of it, and he's got one of the best senses of humor of any college coach out there. He's so comfortable in his own skin, and I might be comfortable in my own skin if I'd won 5 national championships too, and I was the number 1 team in the country again for it seems like the 28th consecutive year. It hasn't quite been that many, but it's been a decade now where seemingly they're number 1 every year competing for the national championship. But I love him, and but it ties back into what I was saying. The reporters are sitting there asking him a so-so win. There was 41-10. They dominated them in rushing, 305-58. Alabama could have picked the score. Alabama could have come out before the game and said, "This is the score we're going for. We're going to put a hundy on them." We're going to put a hundred. I mean, that's not the way Nick Saban does it.
We want to score 56, and then we're going to stop.
It serves him no purpose. It serves no purpose.
Right. Last night, what he got to do yesterday, I should say, is he got to look at a lot of young linebackers, which we had to do. Their outside linebackers right now are a mess, and if they had to play a top-tier offensive team, I'm not sure how they're going to do with the injuries they have suffered.
Well, yeah, 3 of their top 4 linebackers were out, but James Mosley, who is the younger brother of C.J. Mosley, the former Bama star who's now with the Baltimore Ravens, he made his first start, and so did Keith Holcomb. And that's going to be an issue, and we talked about this on our SEC preview show on Thursday night. Can I do a little plug here?
Absolutely.
A new show here, SEC Preview Show with me and Forrest Conley every Thursday night at 7:30. We break down the game. See, it's much harder to preview the games than to review the games. So, because, you don't know what happened.
Sorry we're making it so easy on you today. I mean, I apologize for that.
I shouldn't tear down this show to try to build my show up. But every Thursday night, at 7:30, it is.
It's always been what you do. All those years at CSS, that's what you did.
You're right. It's always about me. But our Thursday night show, SEC Preview Show, every Thursday night at 7:30. But we talked about that, and I asked Forrest about it. He didn't seem to think so, but I think so. I think it is a big issue. They've got to figure out that linebacking situation.
Parker says Kentucky wins the East. I'm sorry. Move on.
Yeah. If they played divisions in basketball, I'm right there with you. But since they don't, they'll just win the SEC in basketball.
You want to try Tua's last name again?
Yeah, I got to look at it, though.
Tungavailoa.
Tungavailoa.
There you go.
Tungavailoa. Tua Tungavailoa.
Please, Jalen
Remember
Hurts,
that name.
don't get hurt anytime soon.
Exactly.
We need you
and stay all 4 years.
You're
just a sophomores, and we won't have to worry about it.
All right, got to go back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your next tailgate with Texas Pete. LSU last night down on the Bayou gets it done. Beats up on Chattanooga. Coach's team, Ed Orgeron's team, is 2-0.
Do we have a soundbite from Coach O?
No.
Oh, come on. That's the best soundbite you can have.
We pulled one, but we couldn't understand it, so we didn't have time to get in subtitles. But his team is 2-0. Next up, Mississippi State. Danny Etling does another nice job. I'm still on the fence about him. He goes 8 for 14, throws for 227. Is he the quarterback that can keep them in contention in the West?
He's their starting quarterback.
Yes, I know that. I'm aware of it.
Yeah, so he's got to be that guy. Yeah, 227 in the air. Darius Geis, 102 rushing, couple of touchdowns. DJ Chark, 3 catches, 103. Also had a 65 touchdown. Also had a touchdown call back, and that was really kind of the theme afterwards. in this game was Coach O just telling the folks there in Baton Rouge they need to play better. They were penalized 11 times for 74 yards. That's now 21 penalties for the Tigers in their first 2 games. But at the same time, they've beaten their first 2 opponents 72-10. So the other thing that I thought was interesting, they're a little bit concerned about the kicking game. And so you ask if Etling is the guy that leads them to an SEC Western Division title. Can they compete? They got to figure out their kicking game, because when you get in a game against Alabama, how many games against Alabama have we seen them play that were decided by touchdown or less?
9-6 game comes to mind.
There you go, field goals. And they don't have a field goal kicker right now. They missed 2 field goals last night. Coach O said after the game, we're going to have a wide open competition for that field goal job. I don't know whether that means he's going to call do a cattle call on campus. Anybody that can kick, come on out here and let's see if you can put it through the uprights, or whether he just means the guys that he already has on his roster are going to compete for that field goal job. He did joke that when Arden Key, their star sack leader from a year ago, gets back from his injury, maybe they'll let him try to kick a field goal. But that's going to be an issue for games that you get into that are going to be close. Teams like Auburn, teams like Alabama, those tight, tough, taut games that you're going to play in the SEC West, you're going to have a field goal kicker. So I'd say coming out of their ball game against Chattanooga, that's the number one area of concern, is they got to get a guy that can put it through the uprights.
Well, Jared says, I want to see LSU's offense against a good defense. And with that said, hold on. I thought last week's win over BYU was awfully impressive. Yeah. And then BYU gets pounded by Utah last night, so I'm not really sure how impressive that win was. I hate to say it, but the whole LSU offense, Canada's the new offensive coordinator, but I still don't know. Don't know what to make of this team yet.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we still don't know how good they're going to be. We do know this. They have Darius Geis, and he can run the ball.
Darius Geis is good.
And when you got Darius Geis, when you can run the football like LSU is able to run the football, that's a big deal. We've also seen, however, that that's not the only thing you need to be able to do. They had Leonard Fournette the last 3 years, and, they didn't win it last year in his final year. Darius Geis ended up, because of Fournette's injuries, having a bigger year than he did. And it still was not enough. So you do have to have a wide-open offense. That's why Matt Canada is now the OC. That's why Ed Orgeron, quite frankly, is now the head coach, because of their offensive struggles. So, yeah, we still have to see what LSU can do offensively. Let me add this. Really, the biggest news coming out of LSU last night was that the number 1 quarterback in the country, Justin Fields from Harrison High School in Atlanta, was in attendance at that game. He paid a visit to LSU, talked to Coach O, Coach Canada, prior to the game down on the field. He was a visitor for that game. Of course, everybody in the world is after him. Georgia and Florida State considered the front runners for him, but I wouldn't count out Alabama. I wouldn't count out LSU. If I'm Justin Fields, which I'm not, if I was a 5-star dual threat quarterback and the number 1 rated quarterback in the country, I'd be looking at a situation where I could go and play right away.
Fields is going to FSU or UGA, so forget about LSU.
But are you going to UGA? And are you going to?
Writes in, Armin, what are you smoking?
Yeah, I mean, if you're Fields, are you going to UGA where you have Easton and you have Fromm already?
Wherever you go, you're going to have to compete.
Yeah, you're going to have to compete, but you want to go to a place where
Fromm the be-all end-all? Is Easton the be-all end-all? We thought he was. He's not.
Well, you're right, but I mean they're ahead of him already, and you're right. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, but you could definitely see him having an opportunity to go to LSU and compete for the starting job pretty quickly, right?
Absolutely.
He would bring a different dimension to that LSU offense, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether he's going to LSU or not. I do know, however, that he was visiting LSU last night.
All right. There you go. You want to talk volunteers?
Well, let's do it.
All right, back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Tennessee home to Indiana State last night, and the Vols could have they could have named their score as well.
Name your score kind of game.
Some positives in this game besides the obvious. Indiana State didn't convert a third down. 0 for 11, so good sign for Tennessee there. You want to
is that third down or 3-point shooting? Now, if they had Larry Bird, they would not have been 0 for 11 on their threes if they had Larry Bird. That was his alma mater.
I want you to fill in the blank.
You know that, right?
Yes, I do know that.
I'm asking them. I know you know that. It's kind of a Rhetorical
I think that team went 33-0.
Did you know that Larry Bird is the most famous Indiana State Sycamore?
I believe they went 33-0, and then they lost to Magic Johnson's Michigan State team in the title game.
No, in the semifinals, wasn't it? No, in the title game. You're right. The title game. You're right.
All right, fill in the blank for me. Carlos, how does he pronounce his last name?
Filsamin.
Filsamin.
He scored 2 touchdowns. Filsamin.
We're going to be talking more about him.
Naples, Florida, had a couple of touchdowns in this game.
Did have a couple of touchdowns. I want to talk about the defense just a little bit because against Georgia Tech on Monday night, this defense got beat up. Tennessee should have lost this football game. If Georgia Tech would have made 1 or 2 plays, finished off some drives, it's not even a game. Mm-hmm. So they give up over 600 yards, and then they come back. And, this team had to be tired. It was a Monday night game.
Yeah, that's the big story here. I mean, you're right. I mean, I keep jumping in. You don't even get to finish a comment, do you?
It's like the old days.
It's just like the old days. You start a comment, and I jump in and hog it and steal
Jared
it away
says
from
Tennessee has a defense. Yeah, I think they do, Jared. Come on, give us some time. And Robert says even if the Vols lose, which they will still be champions at life. Okay, there you go. There you have it.
Yeah, I think the point that you were trying to make before I jumped in and stole the conversation is that, I think that's the big story here with Tennessee is they had a hard game. They had a hard game against Georgia Tech in Atlanta. Tough game that they won. They found a way to win in overtime. Didn't get back to Knoxville until the a.m. hours of Tuesday morning there after playing late into Monday night. And then you turn around and you got a game on Saturday. I don't care who you're playing. It's still a game that you got to get ready for physically, mentally, emotionally. They did that. And I think that was the big story for Tennessee in this game is that that's what they did.
Nice game by Dormady. He goes 13 of 18. Love the quote from Filsamy. Whenever I'm on the field, all my troubles go away, and they certainly did last night for this team.
And that's in reference to the fact he's from Naples, Florida, and of course Hurricane Irma is bearing down on his hometown.
Thoughts and prayers for sure.
As we speak. So I mean that's where, and I'm not storm tracking here, but that's where the hurricane's going, right? So that's what that was talking about. So he was able to get on the football field, have himself a nice day. Kind of take his mind off of the storm, off of what's facing the ordeal that's facing his family back home in Naples, Florida, and that's great. I mean,
Kenny Lee says Vols will find another way to lose to Florida again. They play Florida this coming weekend. At this point in time, we don't think there's going to be issues with the game being played in Gainesville. You had mentioned Florida had to cancel its game with Northern Colorado. If the Gators might have been thinking ahead a little bit more, maybe this game could have been moved.
Yeah, well, I don't ever want to get into a place. You're right about that. And I know that Miami took a lot of heat for not playing their game at Arkansas State. In fact, some national reporters took them to task on that. A former coach, Rick Neuheisel, who now does a show on XM Radio. He kind of ripped into him a little bit. But here's the point: just because a team can get to another place to play the game doesn't necessarily mean that's the right thing to do. In the case of Miami, 90% of that roster is from South Florida, and for them to think that just because they could have gotten to Jonesboro, Arkansas, and played that game, that was the right thing for them to do. I thought it was the right thing for Miami not to play that game, and I certainly think it was the right thing for Florida not to play their game. Certainly there could have been some other options, like the game I called yesterday for ESPN. The New Hampshire at Georgia Southern game was originally scheduled for Statesboro. They moved it to Legion Field in Birmingham and played that game. So there were other options out there, but I would never criticize a program for taking safety of their players, their families, their fans, and even those people who don't give a rip about the football game, because when you have that football game, there's so much that has to be put into making sure that football game goes on that it takes away from the important stuff. Just think about the traffic, the mess that it already was, and then if you're trying to play a football game on top of that. So I congratulate the teams that were bold enough to say, you know what, we're going to put our community, our fans, our players and everybody ahead of our own personal interest, and that is to play this football game by not playing the football game.
You're always the voice of reason. By the way, it was a nice game for Tennessee last night. We were talking about Tennessee. Brandon Johnson had a nice game. Do you know who his dad is?
Yes, I do.
Oh,
Former,
I know. Come on.
The former All-Star catcher Charles Johnson. That's why they live down in Miami, because
Florida,
he
yes.
played for the Marlins, and he was a great defensive catcher. Not a bad offensive catcher either, but he was really kind of a great defensive catcher, Charles
What was
Johnson.
the most home runs he ever hit in one season?
I would say 23.
31.
Okay, there you go. That was back in the.
It was the 2000 season, I
There you
believe.
go. How about that?
I looked that up.
There you go.
Because
You
I knew
did.
I wanted to stump Matt and couldn't do it.
I just was guessing.
All right. Let's get to the rest of the SEC scores. Take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Kentucky a winner over Eastern Kentucky. Mark Stoops' team is now 2-0. Ole Miss beats UT Martin. Matt.
Yeah, how about Shea Patterson now? He's like thrown for 3,000 yards in the first 2 games of the season.
489, yeah.
That was a single game record, 489. I think we're going to see a lot of that this year. I think we're going to see a lot of big balloon numbers from Shea Patterson passing the ball. He had big numbers in their win against South Alabama the first week and goes for 489 yesterday against UT Martin. I think it is worth noting the Skyhawks. Did you know that was their nickname?
I did not.
The Skyhawks actually had the lead in this game in the second quarter. But Ole Miss, 2-0 under new coach, or is he interim coach?
Coach still?
Matt Luke, he's
Matt
2-0.
Luke,
So that's a good start. It's going to be a long year probably for the Rebels, but 2-0. And good for him.
Good look right
He
there.
has stepped into,
Coach is fired up.
And what was I saying? Very top of the show. What did I say? Offensive line coaches, they're the fire 'em up guys. That's what you got right here. You got an offensive line coach who's now your head coach. Those offensive line coaches are less
Wasn't
the
Phil Fulmer an offensive line?
He was. Defensive coordinators, offensive line coach. If you're looking for a head coach that's going to be, that fire 'em up, rah-rah kind of guy, those are the kind of guys you want. If you're looking for more analytical and X and O guys, you go with the OCs.
All right, Vanderbilt 42-0 over Alabama A&M, and if nothing else, you got to feel good for Derek Mason. His team is 2-0.
First time for Mason. They've been 2-0 in his 4 years as the head coach there. Kyle Shermer, 4 touchdown passes and a touchdown run in this thing. And I'll be watching that game this week because I've got Alabama A&M at South Alabama on my ESPN schedule. Another plug for Matt Stewart. This Saturday, 7 o'clock on Watch ESPN.
All right, Texas A&M gets its first win. You can correct me right here. Beats Nicholls State.
Nichols, the Colonels of Nichols.
They're not Nicholls State anymore.
They're not Nichols State anymore.
When did this happen?
I don't know. They've dropped. It's been a while. The double L Nichols too dropped the state. 24-14.
This was tied at 14 in the fourth quarter.
Now before remember Georgia struggled to beat Nichols themselves last year. I did a game back in 2014 at Arkansas. Nichols at Arkansas. 70-7, Arkansas beat Nichols. It was 56-0.
Who's the coach? Is that Bobby Petrino?
No, it was Brett.
Okay.
Brett Bielema was the head coach. This is what
Those were the good old days.
This is what I remember about that game. I can't remember who the coach was for Nichols, but I do know that 2 weeks later he was fired. But it was 56-0 at halftime, and it was clearly Arkansas scored on their first 3 plays from scrimmage. They had one play. First 3 plays from scrimmage they scored. 56-0 at halftime. Bielema goes, meets the head coach at midfield at halftime as they're going to the locker room and says, hey, look, we'll do a running clock in the second half. The Nichols coach refused.
Went ballistic.
He refused. They got beat 70-7.
Could have been worse.
Yeah, it could have been. And he got fired 2 weeks later.
So is Kevin Sumlin going to get fired now?
I tell you what,
How hot is his seat?
How
hot can his seat possibly be, I guess?
After they blew the game against UCLA, there was nothing that they could have beaten Nichols 70-0. It wouldn't change how hot his seat was. And the fact they only beat him 24-14 only makes it hotter. And we posed this question on our SEC preview show Thursday night at 7:30 right here on
In case you didn't know.
In case you didn't know, that's my second
Matt
plug
will
for
tweet that out. Be a follower of Matt. Do you want to give your Twitter
at
handle?
Matt Stewart TV. We asked that question. I'll ask it to you. Do you think he's going to get the Les Miles here this year and get fired in the middle of the season?
It could happen. We've already had a booster come out and say that. Here's his last 4.
Not just a booster, a board of region.
Board of Region, excuse me. Not just a booster.
Because the difference is the board
Yes,
of region.
he's got to vote.
He's got to vote.
He's got to vote. No, my apologies.
He's not just a guy with a big mouth. He's got to vote.
Last 4 years in the SEC after Johnny Manziel, they went 6-2 that season with Manziel. 4-4, 3-5, 4-4, 4-4. Texas A&M, I'll tell you, if you don't know the culture at Texas A&M, and unfortunately I got a lot closer to that program than I would have liked to, they're not going to stand.
What do you mean? What exactly do you mean by that?
Oh, when you're a Longhorn, anywhere close to A&M is not good.
I do wish they would play that game, though.
Got to play that game. Come on, people.
This
is college football.
Exactly,
it's fun. You play the games.
Exactly. The last game of the season for the Aggies should be a non-conference game against Texas.
I think it should be the season opener, actually. I think it'd be a great season opener.
That or the last game. I like it.
But Kevin Sumlin, you cannot go 500, sub 500, 4 straight years and expect to keep your job. It's just not the culture there. They have spent too much money on stadium renovations. There are 104,000 seats now. They're starting to be emptied. Can't do that. Kevin Sumlin is clearly on whether he deserves to be or not. I'm not going to answer that question. He is squarely on the hot seat.
Yeah, and then we had the unfortunate incident this past week with the racist note that was sent to his family. Come on, folks. Come on. I mean, come on. Look, if you don't like him as a head coach, there's clearly enough ammunition there, as Bob just pointed out, his records. I mean, there's clearly enough ammunition for you to go after him based on his record. But come on, don't be a bunch of Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals. Let's move forward in this country. Let's move forward in our thought process. Just judge the man on his head coaching record.
Well, Kenny Lee says Texas A&M is suspect. You think? Come on, Kenny, you got to come with something stronger than that. This is a very suspect team.
He was just trying to. Maybe he thought this was Twitter, and he was trying to do it in 140 characters.
Jared says, who would Texas A&M hire? Chip Kelly? Might not be a bad choice.
Yeah, wow, wouldn't that be something? To get Chip Kelly? I'm sure he'd like it. They got lots of money. They'd certainly pay him.
He's not doing anything these days, not that I know of,
just
right?
TV work, right?
He's just TV work. He's sitting out.
Waiting for the best opportunity.
Okay, the only team I think we didn't talk about is Mississippi State.
Well, let's talk about the Bulldogs.
Dan Mullen's team gets it done big, and
they put
off
over
to a 2-0 start.
Yeah, they put over 100 points. Real quick, what's that? That's like 106 points on the board.
57 this week.
Yeah, 49 the first week, a 49-0 shutout of Charleston Southern the first week, 57-21 on the road in Ruston, Louisiana, which against a decent Conference USA team. Nick Fitzgerald, 3 touchdown passes, 2 touchdown rushing, and they play host to LSU in their next game. So we'll find out for sure and for real just how good Mississippi State is. But I think we can say that they may be better than a lot of people thought they would be. Certainly they've been impressive in their first 2 victories.
All right, I tell you a couple of questions I was going to ask you before we started the show. Let's jump on those. Which SEC coaches or coach has the biggest smile on their face this morning after last night's and yesterday?
I don't think there's any doubt it's Kirby Smart. There was so much invested in this game from the Georgia faithful. Now, again, just based on the surface, Georgia goes up to Notre Dame. That they hadn't played in the Midwest since 1965 when Vince Dooley led his. At the time, Vince Dooley was just his 3rd year as the head coach. Led the Bulldogs up there and got a big upset in Ann Arbor against Michigan. And the Fighting Irish are 4-8. How good are they? Based on last year, not very good. Not very good at closing out games. I think they were 1-7 in one-possession games last year. They're now 0-1 in one-possession games here in 2017. But the fact that the Georgia fan base had invested so much in this game financially, a lot of money spent by Bulldog fans.
Even Vince Dooley was there.
And he threw out the first pitch at Wrigley Field on Friday, showing great respect for Vince Dooley. The fact that Georgia fans had invested so much in this game financially, emotionally, mentally. Georgia fans probably put a lot more eggs in the basket of this Notre Dame game than it probably deserved to get because, again, Notre Dame was a 4-8 team last year, and how good are they this year? We don't really know. But it was a big win, and that's why Kirby Smart, because if he hadn't won it, just think about the repercussions of that. But the fact that they won it, no matter how big it actually turns out to be, he's the guy with the biggest smile on his face right now.
Armin agrees with you, and Lewis both agree with you.
Thank
Kirby
you,
Smart.
Armin and Lewis.
By the way, my
that.
sister was at the game, and I didn't even know she was going up there.
She probably didn't want you to ask for tickets.
I saw it on Facebook. She doesn't have any extra tickets. I don't even know where she got her tickets
but if
she
tells the family, look, I'm going, and then somebody's going to be like, do you have an extra ticket? Do you have an extra ticket? Do you have an extra ticket? So she kept it secret.
Don't get extra tickets. No one get. Okay, which SEC coach or coaches didn't sleep very well last night?
I think it's Brett Bielema. Yeah, I do. I mean, he's 26 and 27 now. Clearly looks like it's a program that's not moving forward. If not sliding backwards, they're treading water. This is a program that got manhandled by TCU in their own stadium, 28-7. This was a game that Arkansas won last year, 41-38. So TCU obviously is not in the same place that they were last year when they finished 6-7, got beat by Georgia in the Liberty Bowl, and Arkansas maybe not being in the place they were last year when they finished 7-6, and that might not be a good thing. They might not be as good as they were last year and when they went 7-6. So I think Brett Bielema is feeling a lot of pressure there in Arkansas, as we talked about earlier in this show. Arkansas fans expect a lot. And people around the Southeast might say, why? Well, you have to know their history. They expect a lot, whether that's realistic or not. I think it is. I think they've had coaches there that proved it is realistic, that Arkansas can win, can compete. And Bielema is under 500 in his fifth year as a head coach. That's why he's not smiling or sleeping very well.
Got a great comment from Ronnie. Sumlin is sleeping through the season so far.
Yeah, I guess I could have gone Sumlin, but they did win. They did win for what it's worth. Yeah, they did win. It was a win. Bielema didn't. That's why I went with Bielema.
Yeah, Gus Malzahn, I think he's struggling to sleep a little bit with that offense.
But it was Clemson. Yeah, you're right.
I understand
we
that.
could have gone Gus Malzahn there, but
Gosh, you got to show us something.
Yeah, we could have.
Jared says Gus Malzahn did not go to the Waffle House last night.
Yeah, you should always go to the Waffle House. Win or lose, you should always. No loss should be so big that you don't go to the Waffle House and get the pecan waffles with a crispy side of bacon.
And
That's
you know
what
what goes good on your eggs is Texas Pete hot sauce.
Yeah,
really
you know
does.
what? I tell you what, we are looking for more sponsors here. I mean, if someone like Waffle House wanted to step up and have us a nice big breakfast for us here on a Sunday morning, we'll do the Texas Pete and we'll eat it right here in front of all you guys.
I do the Texas Pete on my eggs. It's very good.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, contenders, pretenders. Let me throw three teams at you.
Yeah, man.
South Carolina.
Now hold on a
Contenders in the
second.
East?
What are we contending for, and what are we
for the Eastern
pretending
Division
for?
crown, not the SEC title, East crown.
I
Any contention?
would say that my gut tells me that they are not contending for the SEC East crown, but the reality of the situation, and mathematically they are contending. They are 1-0 in the SEC East, and they're.
I got to stop you there.
Wait,
Jared says get a bigger bottle of Texas Pete. We know that, Jared.
I'm with you,
Okay.
man. I am with you. A bunch of bottles. I mean, a case of Texas Pete, and I get to take some home with me. But no, they are they're 1-0. They're going to be 2-0. They're going to beat Kentucky next week, and they're going to be 2-0 in the SEC East. That's a great start. I mean, that's going to be a great start, and it's probably. I don't know has anybody ever run the table in the SEC East? Maybe Florida did and go undefeated in the division.
Georgia might have back in the day.
No, Georgia, no.
They didn't do it the
No,
year
no,
that
no.
David Green was a quarterback and they won the title.
No.
Okay.
No.
Sorry.
They might have won it with two. I mean, typically the SEC East is a division that's won with 2 losses. So if you get out to a 2-0 start, I believe in them. I mean, so do I think they're contenders? Ultimately, I don't think so, but they put themselves in a position where they deserve to be called contenders with the way they've started the season.
All right, Tennessee, contender, pretender.
I can't. Not enough. Insufficient evidence. Incomplete on that.
Nice.
I mean, they did beat Georgia Tech. Probably should not have, but they did. And so it doesn't matter whether you should have or you shouldn't. It just matters whether you did or you didn't, and they did. So, and then they beat Indiana State this week, which they were supposed to do, even though it was a tough week, a short week for them. Don't know yet. I don't know yet. They got to solve their quarterback. I think that Dormady is their quarterback. Guarantano's not going to be their quarterback. But I just don't know yet. They lost a lot from last year's team that was supposed to win the SEC East. They probably missed their shot at it last year. So I'd say no right now. No.
All right, LSU was not on my list, but Brant says, hey, y'all think LSU is a better threat this year without that old Les Miles offense?
I don't know, because we haven't seen anything different.
What do you think?
I don't know. We haven't seen it. I mean, they beat BYU.
Look at that crystal ball that used to always show me.
Well, The crystal ball? What are you talking about? No, I don't know. I mean, I'm just trying to be honest with you. I don't want to hear him blow smoke and invent answers. I don't know. We haven't seen anything really from
that team. Wasn't on my list. Let's go to Auburn. Okay. Auburn, contender, pretender. Does Gus Malzahn write this offense? We know the defense is pretty good.
Yeah, right now I have to say they're pretenders because their quarterback they gave up 11 sacks yesterday. Their offensive line gave up 11 sacks to Clemson, and Clemson's good. Clemson's one of the best defenses in the country. They have two of the best defensive tackles in the nation, and they proved it. And their linebacker, Justin Bryant, got after it, had 4 quarterback sacks in this game. That's a big problem. When you give up 11 sacks, that's not just that's not just an accident. That really happened. 11 sacks means they're not contenders right now until they figure out their problems on the offensive line, because they're going to be facing other teams very similar to them defensively. LSU, they're going to be facing Alabama. They're going to be facing some good defensive teams. They gave up 11 to Clemson. There's going to be more of that coming along the pike unless they figure things out on that O-line.
Well, Lashad says, UGA, I'm out. So there's your pick for the East. All right, let's give out some game balls. A lot of deserving candidates.
And I love the people's comments, but you got to elaborate. You can't just say UGA and I'm out.
No, you can't just say UGA and I'm out. He can.
No, he can't. No, I mean,
you could never do that.
You quote that. I mean, I'm not quoting you unless you give me some. We need to have some substance behind your comments. UGA and I'm out doesn't work. I mean, it's UGA because it's Alabama because it's Auburn. Whoever you're talking about, it's because.
Well, Brad says, why isn't South Carolina on the scoreboard? Brad, they were on their own separate scoreboard. At the end, we just gave the other teams. They were on their own separate scoreboard. South Carolina.
Wipe the drool from your mouth and wake up, man. We already covered that.
Offensive game ball.
They didn't tell me I had to be nice on this show.
You never have been.
Oh, that hurts. That cuts.
Actually a nice shot.
That cuts.
Offensive game ball. Be nice. Give an offensive game ball.
Deebo Samuel. Giving it to Deebo Samuel. I mean,
for South Carolina.
There you go. 2 kickoff return touchdowns in consecutive weeks. Opened the game against NC State, kind of set the tone for the upset there with the kickoff return. And then after they fell behind 10-0 against Missouri last night, has a lightning bolt 97-yard kick return for a touchdown that turned that game in South Carolina's favor. 15 seconds later, South Carolina had the lead, and they never trailed again. So Deebo Samuel also had 5 catches in that game. He gets my offensive game.
Brad agrees with you. He says Deebo Samuel.
Thank you, Brad.
Leo, Alabama needs to step up their game. Come on,
Who?
Leo, really?
Oh, man.
Leo,
come
give
on.
it the program.
Did you pay attention to that game at all? I mean, that's a typical Alabama game against a team that that's not a challenge. They never run up the score. Saban never does that. I mean, that was a typical game right there for Saban and a mismatched opponent.
Scott says, what do you think about Blankenship getting that Scully?
Good for him.
Did he actually get it last night, or did he really have it earlier in the week?
I heard that it had been awarded earlier in the week, and that they waited for the moment after the game. Now, what had happened if he'd missed the field goals? Would they have
taken the scholarship?
That scholarship?
All right, defensive game balls.
We rescind that offer. They've been known to do that. I'm not
Who's
talking
been
about
known to do that?
all schools. They rescind.
I thought you meant Georgia's been known to do
all
that,
schools.
singling
Yeah,
out Georgia.
no, not singling out Georgia. All schools have been known to rescind
Usually
that.
it's after the season. It's not after a game.
Or during the recruiting process.
Right.
They come back to a kid, and the kid's been planning for months and months and months to go to that school, and the school says, hey, by the way, that offer is no longer there. So it's the unsavory, unsightly side of college football recruiting.
Scholarships.
And your school does it, and your school does it, and your school does it.
Scholarships for the most part aren't they? Most of the schools still only given the 1 year.
Oh, yeah. It's just like
some are given 4 years now. All right. Did you want to give a defensive game ball?
Yeah, Lorenzo Carter and Davin Bellamy get my those guys. And they sealed the game, too, with the blindside sack by Davin Bellamy and then the fumble recovery by Lorenzo Carter. But those guys were beasts, if you will.
Carter and J.R. Reed.
Yeah, Lorenzo Carter, 7 total tackles, a sack, 2 quarterback hurries. Bellamy, 6 total tackles, a sack, 2 quarterback hurries. Those guys... those guys were the kind of guys they kind of got lost in the when Georgia had the 4 players that were thinking about going to the NFL draft, and Lorenzo Carter and Davin Bellamy were a couple of those guys, and everybody always talked about Nick Chubb coming back, Sonny Michel coming back, and all that kind of stuff. But Lorenzo Carter and Davin Bellamy showed you last night why it was very big for those guys to come back as well. And I think they're putting money in the bank, but with the way they're playing this year.
Remember when Lashad said, UGA, I'm out?
Yeah.
Well, now he says he's back.
Oh, good. What do you got?
That's it. I'm back.
Oh, thanks.
I
didn't know you'd left.
Speaking of
I guess he
out,
told us
do we want to get out of here?
Yeah, I
What do you
guess
think,
so.
guys? You want to do another hour, or let's just get out of here? All right.
Can I say watch 7:30 our SEC preview show 7:30 on Thursday nights with Forrest Conley. Forrest is a big dude, man. I wouldn't get on his bad side.
I'm going to write this down. 7:30 on what, Thursday
Thursday
night?
nights, SEC preview show.
Why do people do this? Why did David Letterman do that?
I
How did
don't
he do
know.
that with his pen?
It's a good way to get sick.
All right, Thursday night.
Sticking odd things in your mouth.
All right, this is the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. Thank you for watching. Matt Stewart actually sitting in for Hans Heiser, so Hans has some big shoes to fill next week. Thanks for doing it. Appreciate it.
Had fun. Hope I didn't offend anybody. If I did, I'm not really sorry.
See you guys next week. Enjoy.